here we are, and this is the David the Dog Trainer podcast, episode 35.
Wow.
Whew, here we are. Here we are.
Yep.
Took last week off. I was in Vegas for a couple of days, but we're still doing 2 this week.
Yep.
Because we will have 52 podcasts by the end of the year. Getting close. 34 is getting very close to 52.
Yeah.
Josh and I were just talking about some big plans we have for our next podcasts coming up in... Not next podcast, for next year for
next
the podcast.
Yeah.
So we're excited to put some more thought to that. Keep this thing evolving for you guys. Mm-hmm. So we got a fun one for everybody today.
Ooh.
Fun one. We'll get into the meat and potatoes of it. But I've had some time to stew and have an actual plan. So this is not a random podcast. This is a podcast that has structure, if you will.
Wow.
Doobie, what's new?
Let's see. We've had a couple weeks now. I took some shots for Cloak and Dagger. They're very important shots because they're going to be in the New York Times.
Are you allowed to say that?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Are you spilling the news without them knowing?
I don't think it's maybe. I don't know. Oh, no. Nah, it'll be fine.
It'll be fine.
It'll be fine.
It'll be fine.
No one say anything.
You heard it first here.
Yeah, but don't say anything.
Yeah. Don't tell anybody.
But it's a very important thing for me because that means my photos are going to be published.
Hell yeah.
There.
I didn't even think about that. That's sweet.
Yeah. So that's like a super cool opportunity for me.
Yeah.
Shoot, I didn't even think about that. Don't say anything, anybody. Other than that, I'm working with Guardian Cold Brew.
The denim cap.
Yeah,
man.
the denim cap.
I keep looking at it. I'm like, man, that's so 90s.
It is 90s, but I kind of like it.
Yeah,
I'm not going to lie. But I'm doing a shoot for them today, actually. Going to try a couple of cool shots. And then...
Did you get your shipment of salt in yet?
I did. I got the... Listen, they sent me 30 pounds of salt.
Jesus.
Yeah. It was just this huge box and I like went to pick it up and I'm like, holy shit. Like, what the hell?
It's pretty heavy.
Yeah, but it's like 4 boxes of each kind, like size that they have their salt. So they usually purvey to kitchens and chefs specifically because they do such large quantities. So all their products are just these huge boxes, but they're trying to get into the residential market. So hopefully I'll be shooting that later. But we got that date set. I think the 18th. I'm renting out a kitchen and got a chef, and it's going to be a big deal.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Do you know where you're renting the kitchen out?
Yeah, Jason Dean's house, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That'll be cool.
Yep. Next one I'll probably do is probably Aaliyah's kitchen, just because it's like a really pretty setup. But yeah, Jason's kitchen is just like
brand new.
Oh man,
It's brand new.
Brand new. I mean, I'm bringing a bunch of backdrops too, so it's like no matter where I did it, it's gonna be like a bunch of different things for them to use for their websites and stuff. So, we're gonna have like 5 or 6 like food options. Like the guy that's cooking up things has got this whole little menu he's putting down. And this is the first time that I actually asked for like money for like the props and stuff, and they were just like, "Yeah." I'm like, "This is great."
Look
like,
at that.
Yeah, the guy like understood. He's like, "Yeah, I don't want you to have to like make no money off of this because you have to buy everything."
Isn't that cool when you work with like somebody like an established company that's just like, oh yeah, we actually have a budget for this.
Yeah, exactly. And
like, just make it look good.
Yeah, I don't remember if I said it last time on the podcast, but they went with some photo studio last, and it was horrible. He's like they spent an exorbitant amount of money, and they didn't get anything that they really wanted. So it makes me wish I would ask for more, but it is what it is. But I think I'm going to blow them away with this.
Yeah.
And then it'll be easier to ask for more money in the future
For sure.
for bigger projects and stuff. So, but it was like a really nice feeling, that I was able to, I've always had a problem with not charging enough for my work.
Everybody does initially.
Yeah. And it was like my first step of like, okay, throw this number out. And I was just like, close my eyes and throw it out. And they were just like, okay. Mm-hmm. I was like, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's what we're doing.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like one of those, yes moments. And it feels good because technically I started my business a year ago, like in June. So a little over a year.
Rebranded.
Yeah, rebranded.
Yes.
Really started towards the food and product thing. And this is my first like bigger client. Mm-hmm. So it feels really good. It's like,
oh yeah,
just a little over a year into this, and now I'm getting the people that I really want to work with, Mm-hmm. So that's fun.
That's awesome. It's interesting. This was maybe a week ago or so. I was listening to, I don't know, something on YouTube, whatever. And they're talking about, people that look at certain successes as like quote unquote overnight success or this or that. And I think they were equating it to like actors and actresses or musicians or people that like suddenly quote unquote popped, right? Mm-hmm. And I think they were using the example of, I can't remember if it was a musician or an actor. This thing is just all over the place today. There we go. It's like kind of loose. It's loose.
I know.
And they were talking about, suddenly this person got like a quote unquote like big break, and they were, suddenly thrown all over the nation. People knew who they were and this and that, right? And they were like, yeah, this person, overnight success, right? Blah, blah, blah,
yeah.
Right? And that person was talking about it, and they're like, yeah, but like, they didn't see the like 14 years of me being nobody doing this, and just busting ass and just grinding and just doing things and, striving for it to make it happen.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
I think that goes hand in hand with a lot of this kind of stuff. Like you're just saying, like you kind of started your business like a year ago and now you have this big client, but like, you've been grinding at this for what, like 5 years, 6 years, something like that, like trying to make it happen.
That's true.
And now you're gaining the traction,
Yeah.
And I think that that's really cool when you look back on that and you look at like how many times over the course of those 5 years, this is a legitimate question. How many times over the course of those 5 years were you like, fuck, like this might not turn into anything?
Too many to count, for sure.
Right? Like, isn't that wild, though?
Yeah.
But, like, now you are in a position where you're supporting yourself off of doing this.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
Like, you are making enough money to survive, right? You're providing for yourself and your family, right? Mm-hmm. And you're in a position now where you're getting bigger clients, and that ball's rolling. And when this New York Times thing comes out, maybe you get a couple people from that and this and that. And, we talked about this when we first started the podcast, the idea of you just taking care of those, like, one or two clients you had. And it's like, I might not be getting all these other people, but I'm going to really, really take care of these people.
Yeah.
And because you did that, because you busted your ass, you start getting another one. Mm-hmm. And then a couple months later, another one. And then suddenly it's like, oh shit, I got like 10 people that are relying on me for business, right? Yeah. And now I can up my prices because I'm getting too busy. And I just think that process is so cool.
Yeah.
It
feels unreal sometimes, actually. Yeah. And I mean, if it feels unreal now, I can't wait until this time next year.
Sure.
Because
look at in about a year, like the changes and stuff.
Yeah. Exactly. That's what I'm hoping for. But yeah, I didn't even think about it. I was just counting it to the year ago when I rebranded to work on specific things,
But all of that stuff leading up to it allowed, because here's the thing, right? Like a year ago, you were at a point where you had the talent to be able to rebrand and allow that to grow. Yeah. Right? And the only reason why you're in a position to do that is because of those 5 years of developing that skill.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Like, what, 6 years? How long ago was it that you bought all your camera stuff and put yourself in crippling amounts of debt?
Late 2017.
Yeah, so 5 years, something like that.
And, I didn't know a damn thing about cameras. And it's so funny to think about it now. I can see why people thought I might have been a little crazy. Like, oh, you spent, $8,000 or whatever on all this stuff that you don't even know how to use. I was like, I know, but it just sounds like it interests me and like it's something that I'd like to do, Mm-hmm. Back then I wanted to be Casey Neistat, but I through that, like even knowing that I was never going to be Casey Neistat, I already had this stuff, and it was like this drive and this push to be able to use the stuff that I bought, you know?
Yeah.
And
there is something to be said about, and I've fallen into this trap with stuff before where I've spent money on A, B, C, or D, and I'm like, oh, I'm going to use this a lot, and I don't ever touch it, right?
Yeah.
It's like, oh, fuck, I wasted all that money.
Yeah.
But like, there's something to be said about when you really make a big financial investment into something, and like, you have a little bit more of an obligation to then be like, I got to get my use out of this.
Yeah.
You know, so it does push you a little bit.
100%.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, there was plenty of times, especially when in the beginning, I could have just sold it, you know, and I needed that money, but I decided to use it to make money. And and that was the first real gigs I ever had was rental properties in Florida, doing like real estate work and stuff, which is really boring. But I mean, it was cool down there because it was like beach houses, you know.
Yeah.
But up here, I was just like, oh, it's like houses in Parma.
Yeah. Here's a duplex.
Yeah.
Some white walls.
Oh boy.
Weird colored carpet.
Yeah.
Come on, take a picture of it.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, it's been cool to see the transition. I mean, I guess in the same way, it's for you with dog training. You know, I mean, you started under what's his name again? Rob. Yeah, but then when you guys did your own thing, I mean, yeah, you had some people that knew you because you were working with dogs already, but you basically had to build your entire clientele, you know, from scratch, from start, and figure out your own way of training. Because I know you had his training methods, but you know, that first year was probably like a lot of trial and error and growing pains.
It's funny, you know, I distinctly remember in my head, I believe Jake and myself were paying ourselves like $2,100 a month or something for that entire first year or so.
Yeah.
And we were working like 70 to 80 hours a week. Like, what is that?
Yeah.
Let's see.
Yeah, you guys put yourself on a good salary job, huh?
Yeah. 160. Wait, hold on. So that's like, that's like $12 an hour as a business owner.
It's real good.
Yeah.
Wow.
Wild.
Yeah.
No, it's funny. It ties into the conversation we were having earlier before we started the podcast of just putting in the work, no matter what it is that you're trying to do. If you're excited about something, if you are starting a new job that you're really motivated for, gung ho about, or you're, you know, an employee, you know, whether you're starting your own thing or whether you're an employee in a field you really want to be involved in or something like that, just don't be afraid to put in that work.
Yeah.
And, you know, if you fucking grind and bust your ass and, you know, do everything you can to obtain as much of the knowledge as possible that you need to succeed in whatever industry you're in, you will be successful, right?
Yeah.
We're talking about that with, you know, my situation when I was working with Rob. For as awful as it was and for as many hours as I was working, that put me in a position to be able to do the things that I'm doing right now because I was able to gain that knowledge, right?
Yeah.
I was able to gain it as fast as absolutely possible so that I could hit that point where you start seeing then the success and the rise, you know?
Yeah.
So.
And actually, you were making $7.50 an hour.
Yeah, I was going to say my math had to have been horrible there. So,
But yes.
Yeah.
$7.50 an hour. That's even worse.
Yeah, I was doing it off 40 hours. That's why.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So
That
wasn't that
all right.
great. Wasn't that great.
Livable then. But
Yeah.
$7.50 minimum wage. Cool.
Very exciting. Anything else new?
No.
Getting those
That's about
gains.
I am getting the gains. Yeah.
Getting the gains.
We've been the last 5 days. We've been texting pictures of to each other of mid workouts, keeping each other accountable right now.
I'm gonna do that every day, and we're gonna see how consistent I could be.
Okay.
I expect you to do the same.
Okay. I have the shoot
One
right
photo
after this.
every day.
All right. I have the shoot after this, but as soon as I'm done with that, I'm gonna go to the gym.
I like it.
And by the end, by podcast 52, we'll be ripped, shredded,
freaking shredded.
Oh man!
All right, very exciting. So we are going to we are going to get into the podcast here. All right, so we got a couple of questions here, and then I'm going to tie those questions into a couple articles that I have. We're going to discuss those a little bit because there's a lot of, in dog training right now, there is not enough talk on the idea of stopping or inhibiting behaviors, right, or the use of aversive control or any of those types of things. And most of the time when I get questions online, I was talking about this with a client the other day. She was saying, she's like, man, like, if only everybody could afford coming to training, they could have these phenomenal results and they can enjoy all these things with their dogs and this and that. And I told her, I was like, listen, yeah, I mean, that would be great if everybody can get their dog to an off-leash trained point and, be able to enjoy some of these additional luxuries and stuff like that.
Yep.
Or she was equating it to there would be less dogs getting returned to shelters because she was seeing all these articles about dogs getting euthanized over this and that and blah, blah, blah.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
And the conversation I had was, yes, but it's not necessarily the training that is making these people return these dogs, right? It's these general nuisance behavior. It's the dogs that chase the cats. It's the dogs that bark too much. It's the dogs that jump all over their children and guests and they can't have it. It's the dogs that dig holes in the backyard or under the fence and escape. It's all of these other little day-to-day behaviors. Those are the reasons why people get rid of dogs. Obviously, in addition to the aggression and this and that, but that really is a small percentage of this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
The majority of it is they don't have control over the dogs where they can stop some of these nuisance behaviors and they're too annoying or too risky to have around and they have to get rid of the dog over it, right? Yeah. And those types of things don't require thousands and thousands of dollars of training. God, I can't talk to that. I told you it's those post-vacation vibes, right? I can't talk. Those things don't require thousands and thousands of dollars of training in order to stop, right? Those things require an understanding of how to punish a behavior, to stop it and inhibit it and make it go away altogether. Yeah. So we're going to get a little bit into the idea of that using, like I said, a couple of articles that I have here. And we're going to answer a handful of questions on how we would go about doing those types of things.
Cool.
So let me pull.
Catch your breath there, buddy.
All right. Get those short shorts on today.
I know. I can fit in them again.
The short shorts.
Listen. I haven't been able to fit in them this year.
Dude, I'll tell you, I haven't wore this shirt in probably over a year either.
Yeah. Look at that. Look at that.
Shredded. I like it.
We're wearing old clothes.
All right. Question number 1. This question is from Daniela Fernandez CR. I don't know what the CR is. Whatever. All right. Daniela asks, hello. I was looking through your page, and I am currently having an issue right now. I currently adopted a 1-year female cat. I read I had to put them in a separate room and let them associate their smell. But my husky doesn't stop barking at the door, and the first time I got to the house, my husky was barking like crazy at the cat. The cat was inside the carrier. I don't know what to do. Ooh. So again, things that people typically return dogs over. Yeah. Chasing and killing cats. Mm-hmm. Well, let's talk about this for a minute here. So first off, going really broad here to start. A lot of people get really, really concerned when they see cat issues, right? Let's say a dog runs and chases and bites a cat or potentially kills a cat or whatever it may be. Most people's first instinct is that, oh my God, what if that was a child? What if that was a dog, right? Whatever, all these different things. Yeah. And the first conversation I have with them is you have to understand the fact that though we kind of normalize this and think dogs, cats, this, that, they all survive together, everybody's happy, whatever. Cats are prey to dogs, right? The biological instinct that they have to want to chase and hunt those animals when they first see them is a very, very real thing. Yeah. Right? So be aware of that initially so that if you do see any quote-unquote aggression, which I wouldn't even call it aggression, I would just call it prey drive at that point towards your cat, that is normal, right? Now, the positive here is prey drive, in my opinion, is not as emotionally charged of a behavior as something like aggression towards other dogs or aggression towards people or children or any of those types of things. And because it is not quite as emotionally charged of a behavior, that means that it's much easier to create an inhibition of it because you're not fighting the emotions behind the behavior. Because emotions, fear, insecurities, things like that, those are very, very, very powerful motivators. And though biological instinct is a powerful motivator as well, it can be controlled much easier, right? So that's the macro of this situation, is to understand that side of things before you go into this situation, because that will allow you to then set the situation up to be correct, right? So next gets into allowing them to get used to each other. Now, I don't necessarily know if this is a horrible thing to do. That being said, I never have really seen it do much to help the situation either, right?
Yeah.
So, when you have a dog and, you're trying to introduce it to another dog, you're trying to introduce it to another animal or something, first thing everybody says is put them behind gates, let them sniff through the gate. Now, I will say that I do that when I'm introducing dogs to other dogs, but not for the purpose you would think, right? A lot of people look at that and they try to do that because they think they're socializing in that situation. Yeah. They're not actually socializing. The purpose of being able to do that and let them sniff or interact through the fence is to get a good read off of how your animals are going to behave, right? A lot of times you will see an issue if there's going to be an issue before you actually introduce them. So in this case, the dog is really riled up by the cat, barking, freaking out, whatever. So we know that we are going to have something we need to work through when we approach this situation, right? I gotta catch my breath, man. I can't talk today.
Got it.
All right. So next step here is we want to actually put them together, obviously. But this gets into, we need to have a way to discipline the dog for incorrect behavior. So the dog has shown us that the dog is going to get amped up by the other animals, by the cats. So that means that when we go to put them together, when we remove that barrier, that behavior is going to be much more intense. So we need to be positioned to stop that behavior. Now, with dogs and cats, I typically adopt a pretty simple philosophy of just ignore the cat initially. Since it's prey drive, I'm not expecting for them to be buddies or anything. I'm not expecting them to sniff and, lick each other's faces and do all these different types of things. I'm expecting them to ignore each other. So get a remote collar, get some sort of means of disciplining the dog, and we'll get into the proper ways of doing that here in a minute. And simply right when your dog shows that display of arousal, you're going to give a punishment to that dog. So with an e-collar, you'd give a high-level correction to teach the dog to create distance, right? And we've worked with some dogs that have had very, very, very serious prey drive issues, like dogs who have killed other cats before, that couldn't be around them. And we've been able to control that impulse to the point where they learn, just ignore the cat, stay away from it. And then over time, as that prey drive instinct kind of goes away, they start to develop a relationship at that point. It becomes much less of a big deal.
Yep.
But you have to get past that initial impulse. So as you're introducing, again, whether it's with dogs, whether it's with cats, you could do the through the fence kind of trick, but that's just to assess the situation, right? They're not going to just get used to each other through it because the socialization doesn't happen until they're actually interacting with each other. If there's an issue through the fence and you put them together, you would create your inhibition, obviously. So you would give a correction for that impulse of chasing the cat, trying to run after the cat, try to bite the cat, whatever it may be. And then from there, once you've had them to a point where they're staying neutral to each other, the relationship will organically develop. So that's how I would go about solving that type of issue.
Wow. I didn't even think about it of a prey drive being an easier fix, but it does make a lot of sense because it's not an emotionally driven thing. It's just an instinct that they have. But
it's like jumping, right? Yeah. Like jumping is not very emotionally charged, right?
Yeah.
If a dog is jumping on you, they just can't control their impulses. They're like, I'm excited, I need to jump, right?
Exactly.
Not very emotionally charged. It's just a bad nuisance habit that they have. So though it may be a natural instinct they have to try to jump up and leap and get really close to things and stuff, they could learn to control that once they realize, this isn't fun to do, right? So pretty simple. All right, next one here. This question is about a dog that we trained a couple of years ago, Oakley. All right, so this person asks, hey, David, I know it's been a while. Everything's been great with Oakley. We have a question. Not sure if this would fall under training or not. He is afraid of thunderstorms and fireworks, and the only thing that seems to help is some meds from the vet. The last week, Oakley has been waking us up around 2:30 a.m. with the same panting and shaking he does when he's scared. We talked to our vet, and they have us trazodone to try it, or they gave us trazodone to try it. It worked one night, but hasn't really the others. Is this something you suggest, or do we need to come in for a training for it? So I tried to get some further information on it. So my first thing when I read something like this and I hear that my dog is afraid of something and meds are the only thing that helps, my first question is, when the dog is afraid, what does the dog do? Right? Because listen, there's going to be times I'm afraid of things. There's going to be times you're afraid of things. But that doesn't mean that it's a debilitating thing unless you're acting on that fear, right? So I asked, turns out he pants, he shakes, and he paces around uncontrollably. So which of those three things is the problem? The pacing around uncontrollably, because he's doing it in the middle of the night, which is waking them up. It's not allowing them to sleep, and because he's getting himself all worked up from it, right? So there's a lot of trainers out there that talk about you can correct for anxiety, and you can do this, and you can do that. And though they're correct, they're very gray about what that means. Because if you just go in all willy-nilly, and when the dog's being anxious, you just correct them, what is your expectation at that point? Should they magically just not be anxious? No, right? You have to stop what they're doing when they're anxious. So the pacing around and stuff. So I explained to them, I was like, all right, go in, get your e-collar, obviously, and you're going to start isolating the specific behavior of the pacing around, right? This is something that I've done with Vinny in the past. Vinny was a big pacer in the crate. When he gets himself all spun up, he'll start pacing around the house and stuff, and you could see it cycle with him, right? You could see it when he starts doing that. It just like gradually gets more intense and more intense and more intense because they work themselves up, right? It's like if you're anxious about something and then you get home and it's like you're up, you're moving around and this and that. And it's like you just get yourself so spun up, you know, that you can't control it, right? So what I told him to do is give that correction for it and stop the pacing first. What that's going to do is that's going to stop his head from like 100% spinning around and focusing on firework, noise, thunderstorm, this, that, do. And it's going to go from, okay, 50% of me is worried about that, and 50% of me is now focused on I can't be just like aimlessly wandering around all over the place. And once you get that, what happens is then 60% of the brain goes on what it is we want them to do, and then 70%, and then 80%, to the point where they start tuning out those outside triggers or those outside distractions, right? What I have found in my experience is that by just doing that, the anxiety goes down at least 50% right away, and then over time goes down to almost nothing, right? As long as you stay consistent about it and without the need of medical intervention, right? So you could fade out the meds at that point, and you could just focus on, as long as my dog is doing the thing that I want them to do, and as long as I'm getting them to care more about what I'm asking them to do, then that outside trigger, then it's not a problem, right? Same would apply for, let's say, fireworks, right? That's a big one for most dogs. You can start implementing your bed stay during the day while fireworks are going on. And if the dog is getting spooked and trying to run off, you would give a big correction for breaking that position and then getting them to restabilize back in that position. And ultimately, you can get past that fear of fireworks. We had a dog recently in that was terrified of noises, beeping, trucks backing up, this, that. And that's the process we had to do with him. And at first, we had to give some really, really, really big corrections to get him to focus back in because he would just go into a full-on panic. Over time, after we continued to drill that with him, we were at a point where we would put him into a position, we would turn on those noises, or we would go near some of those sounds that typically would cause him to go into an absolute frenzy, and he would notice it for a second, then focus back in on what he was doing. And we were able to tackle that impulse of the fear causing him to just dart and freak out. So always focus on, when you're dealing with fear-based behaviors or anxiety-based behaviors, what is the thing the dog does when they're nervous? What is the thing the dog does when they're scared? What is the thing the dog does when they're anxious? So that's how we would work through that. And I believe she messaged back saying all is well since addressing that.
Perfect. So basically, the big gist of it is getting your dog's mind off what they're afraid of.
Yeah.
You know?
Focus in on something else.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like, you know, some people are just like, well, you're never addressing the fear. The dog's never going to get more confident, this and that. And we've talked about this before. They don't have to not be scared all the time.
Yeah.
Right? That's life, right?
Yeah.
There are things that are going to make you anxious.
Yeah.
Right? There are things that make me anxious.
Yeah.
You know?
Fear's a good thing.
Yeah, right? Point. It's a motivator. We talk about that. And that's why with the example with cats, that's so much easier than something like fear-based stuff because it's not emotionally charged.
Yeah.
Right? But the thing is, what do you do when you're scared? What do you do when you're anxious? You put your mind on something else.
Yes, exactly.
Right? Why do people say that exercise is the best thing for people that are having like anxiety issues and stuff like that? It's because it gets your mind focused on something else. Right? It channels that energy. Because the thing is, when you get anxious, there's some energy involved in that usually, right? So you could channel that and focus that into something more productive, which helps with those issues overall, right? Or work, right? A lot of people, when they get anxious, they dive headfirst into work, right? That's something that I've always done, right? When I feel myself getting anxious about things, I work harder, right? And when I do that, I tend to get past those things faster. So, that is the idea with this.
Makes sense.
All right. Next question here. This question is from Justin Chad Baker. Justin says, hey, I have a question regarding dog possessive aggression. I'm have 3 dogs, 2 females, a lab mix, and then a Shepsky, and 1 male, German Shepherd. The females grew up together and get along fine. The male we got at 7 months old, and he came in the biggest of the 3. He and the Shepsky have been in fights where the Shepsky started it. She is possessive of me, my wife, and the other dog. We didn't introduce them in neutral territory. Do you have any suggestions? It's almost 3 months now, and I really don't want to rehome the German Shepherd. He is a good dog.
First of all, what's a Shepsky?
A Shepherd Husky mix.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, they're little wild things.
Yeah, I was going to say.
I worked with one last night.
Whew. That's a big bundle of energy.
What do you think, Josh? What's going on? What's going on in this situation?
So it's the Shepsky's the one that's being overprotective?
Like Shepsky's being possessive of him, his wife, and the other dog.
And they want to rehome the Shepherd?
No. They don't want to rehome any of the dogs.
Well, no, but they don't want to have to.
They've had the 2 females the longest. The Shepherd is the newest dog.
The male.
So the newest dog, they're like, is going to have to go if one of them goes.
Oh, gotcha. Well,
because they've only had the new dog for, I think, 3 months, they said.
Well, they need to work through the things with the Shepsky. That's the big thing, right? We have to work on that possessive, over-controlling nature.
You're correct.
Yay!
Yeah. I mean, so we talked about this, right? A lot of times people have multiple dogs, right? And then they add a new dog into the house, right? And suddenly there's problems. And then suddenly, again, a lot of that emphasis goes on, man, this new dog is throwing the dynamic off, you know, and we're having issues because of it. But bringing a new dog into the house just exposes all of the issues we may have had with the other dogs. Now, the 2 females that this guy has, they grew up together, so they probably can get away with doing just about anything with them together, right? They have a relationship and a social hierarchy established, and clearly they're not getting into issues with each other. But what probably is happening is they've lived a life with those other 2 dogs where they've cuddled all the time and spoiled them and this and their treats and toys and everything's done together and blah, right?
Yeah.
To the point where those dogs think they're in charge, right? Now suddenly, new dogs coming in, younger dog, rambunctious, bigger, this, that, and those dogs are like, what the hell is this? We have to start controlling this new variable, right? Because they're used to controlling everything else in the house, right? Suddenly that starts turning into fights, that starts turning into issues, and we're like, oh my God, what went wrong, right? What went wrong is we did not have a relationship with our dogs built on respect amongst the household, right? That typically comes from a lack of training and, more importantly, a lack of discipline. When you don't have discipline for your dogs control everything else going around them, and they do what they want when they want to, right? So, and I actually had a call with another person yesterday who has 2 dogs that we were working with that were getting in really serious fights with each other, right? We got past that issue. This was probably 2 years ago, right? Got past the issue. Dogs haven't been in any fights since. They adopted a new dog like 5 days ago, like day 3 in the house. They got into the one of the old dogs and the new dogs got into a fight with each other, right? And the issue was because they were so far past all of the training and everything, they weren't able to understand that because they had this history of issues, when they brought this new dog into the house, all of those behaviors that they used to have with those two dogs originally were going to display themselves in this situation, right?
Yeah.
They were, because you're adding a new variable in. You have to allow them to develop this relationship with each other. And they weren't in a position to correct any of the behaviors. They weren't using the e-collars in those situations and stuff. So because of that, it turned into an issue, right? So we talked about it, and we went over, when we first started working with the dogs, what was the first session or two, right? What did we work on? And what we worked on was creating consequences for different behaviors, right? So they had to go back in and they had to isolate some of those behaviors that they were seeing problems with the new dog, because that's what was triggering the issues, right? And that's how that they will ultimately get past that issue with the dogs. Right? Same deal applies with this. You got to go in and you got to look at overall, we're going to bring another dog into the house that these dogs don't have a relationship with, right? So what sorts of problems am I having? What sorts of behavioral issues am I seeing out of the new dog that I need to address, that my dogs, if I don't go in and check it, are going to try to go in and control it, right? And what issues might I be having with my old dogs that I might need to go in and address as well? And unless you're in a position to be able to do that, stuff like this will never get better. Right? This is not a situation where it's like, oh, we just give them a month and they'll be fine with each other. The problem is, if you've lived your life wrong with your dogs this entire time, and then you go to try to add a variable in, and then there's problems because of it, you're going to have to go in and do all the hard work of undoing everything you've done with these dogs for your entire life. Yeah. And that's a tough situation that I see people fall into very regularly, because it's a lot of work. You know, there's no going in and like, let's like, you know, pick and choose little things we want to work on here and there. It's a matter of going in and resetting everything with the dogs. Yeah. So it's tough work. Yeah. So that would be my recommendation. Look at the old dogs, get an e-collar, start creating disciplining consequences for negative behaviors. Do the same thing with the new dog. That should get you to a point where you can manage the household and start to let them develop a relationship with each other. Remove toys, food, and affection so that there's no competing resources they might be fighting over, and just supervise, right? For like 2 weeks, just supervise the dogs and allow them to develop a relationship with each other, and be there ready to give discipline to any of the dogs for things that you don't want them to do. And after a couple of weeks, they should kind of be in a balanced place. So
I feel like this is a really big one, like what you were foreshadowing earlier about these articles we're going to talk about and stuff, like why dogs go back to the shelters or whatever. That's a big one, you know?
Bingo, right? We don't understand how to live effectively with our lives, or with our dogs.
With our dogs,
yeah. We don't understand how to do it. We don't understand how we create a lot of these problems.
Yeah. And we don't know how to correct them.
Yeah. When things show up, we don't know how to correct them. We think that discipline, you know, and this is not people's fault. This is just like the portrayal of things on like a lot of these shows and stuff. We think discipline is just no bad dog, right? Yeah. Dogs don't give a shit about that. Yeah. You know, they don't. No. Right? You know, we have to be able to do things that the dogs find, you know, that they don't want to happen again. Right? Yeah. And we'll get into exactly how to do that, obviously. All right. We got one more here. This is a different one. This is not a punishment-related question. This question's from Millie Marshall. This is from YouTube. They said, hey, we have a 15-week-old puppy, and we're struggling big time with food motivation. Falling into the trap of feeding high-value treats for training, and now he basically won't touch his food. So thinking of giving the guidance in this video a go. However, it worries me we might miss a week or two of training, as he's never been motivated to work for his food. Is that okay? Yes.
Yes.
Yes, it's okay. Okay, so here's the thing. So the video that they commented this on was one of our videos on developing food drive with your dog, right? And one thing I tell everybody is I do not believe that dogs are picky. I do not believe that dogs just don't have food drive. I think every dog has food drive. I think the problem is we don't have the right structure or the right proportions in which we're feeding to create that food drive. So we wind up very early on, in this case, 15 weeks, we wind up killing that food drive, right? This is usually a combination of multiple things. It's usually a combination of through train. Like these people sound like they're obviously very gung-ho on training, which is fantastic. But the problem is they're using high-value treats for their training. So in addition to the dog's kibble, they're getting treats and treats and treats and treats and treats, which is like an entire additional meal in itself, right? So dog's eating too much. Dog doesn't have any food drive. Dog's just waiting for the treats because those are higher value than the kibble. It's like, I'll just eat that.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, do you want to go to Morton's Steakhouse or do you want to go to McDonald's? It's like,
Yeah.
sometimes I want McDonald's over it, but most of the time I'm going to take the steak.
Yeah.
Right? So, so that's thing number one. Thing number two is they just feed way too much kibble because they follow the instructions on the bag, which always tell you to feed too much.
Yep.
Or three, they are giving table scraps. The dog is eating the cat food that's over in the corner. There's just other variables where the dog is getting additional calories, right? So, yes. And here's the thing. With this dog being 15 weeks old, most young dogs have really, really good food drive.
Yeah.
So you should be able to switch this very, very quickly. Yeah, like they're saying they're going to miss a week or two of training. You should be past this in like 3 days.
Yeah.
The way you're going to do that is by doing a pretty dramatic cut. I don't know what kind of dog it is. I don't know how big this dog is, but assuming it's a 15-week-old puppy and it's not massive, cut that food back to like for a week. I would do half a cup in the morning, half a cup in the evening, nothing else. No treats, right? Get a baseline where that dog is hungry again. That dog really wants that kibble again. Work them for that kibble every chance you get. Follow the directions that were in that video for more details on how to do this. And then at that point, then you could readjust a little bit as you need to. But you're going to have to cut those high-value treats out altogether. You're going to have to make sure that you're only doing your kibble, and you're going to have to make sure you stay really, really strict about that process with it. Now, the other thing is, let's say they were missing a week or two of training because of this. That's not going to be the end of the world, right? Because training is not exclusive to when we're doing our treat training and we're teaching sit and down and stay and all this kind of stuff. Training is all the other things that we're doing with the dog. Us going for walks and working on our structured healing, which requires no food to do so. Us creating discipline for unwanted behaviors in the house, which requires no treats to do so. Us setting structure and routines in the house and how we go about doing our day-to-day tasks, which requires no treats to do so, right? All of those things are arguably more important than all of that other training you do. The training is necessary, and it helps us to be able to communicate better with the dog and have a better vocabulary to use with them. But all those other things is where all your magic is going to happen.
Yeah. And the other thing is, and people always think those little training treats, they're only 4 calories each. I'm like, yeah, but now you're giving your dog 40 of those during your entire little session. So now
that's quite a bit.
Yeah, you've given them, 300, 400 calories,
Yep.
So I don't know. It seems like you're not doing so much extra, but you really are.
Yeah. It really winds up being a ton extra.
Yeah. I think what was we were talking about a few episodes ago is the greenies. They're like,
oh yeah, the greenies. Yeah, I forgot exactly how much it is, but I think they're like 500 or 600 calories.
Yeah, it was like insane.
For one of those.
Yeah, and they're like, get one of these a day for fresh breath. Yeah.
I'll tell you, I used to get dog. When I remember when I first bought Vera. I went to the pet store and I was like, I gotta buy stuff for my dog, and I'm going around and I bought all sorts of shit from there. I was like, I never had a dog before. I'm like, crate pad, dog bed, 9,000 different kinds of treats, food. This, I think I spent like $300 there or something, And I used to do the greenies every day also because that's what they said. They're like. They told me, they were like, you got to do the greenies every day. This was the workers there. And then you got to do, they had the omega-3 edible chews or something like that. They're like, and those fatty acids, they're really, really important for your dog. So make sure you give those at least 2 a week. First off, that would be expensive as fuck. Like, those things were they're not cheap. Right? And I was looking at it, I was like, God, I have to do this every week, And 2, I'll tell you, those greenies did not make their breath smell any better. No. Like, not at all.
No. Not at all.
So don't worry about that. The greenies aren't going to help.
Don't get the greenies.
And then you hear but he really likes them.
I bet he does.
I bet he does. A lot of things I really like, too.
Yeah.
I don't get them every day. I really like ice cream.
Yeah, but I shouldn't have that every day.
Nope. So, okay. So those are our questions. So we're going to tie this into our next 2 topics, right? So we talk about the biggest prevention of dogs getting returned to shelters, in my opinion, is having an ability to stop unwanted behaviors, right? Unwanted behaviors are the reason dogs get returned, not because dogs don't know 9,000 different tricks.
Yeah.
Right? That is, in my opinion, the easier part to do on your own, right? You just have to understand what is the proper formula to addressing unwanted behaviors. So I have 2 articles here. These articles were both written by Gary Wilkes. I've talked about Gary Wilkes fairly frequently. Gary's I think he's 70 some years old at this point.
Yeah.
Dude has been training dogs for fucking ever.
Yeah.
Very, very intelligent guy. And what I like about him is he's hit this point in his life where because he's old, he doesn't give a shit about what anybody thinks about him also. So if you follow him on Facebook or read his blog posts, his recent ones, the ones that have come out in the last 2 years.
Yeah.
He's a tough cookie. He does not care about your feelings. He cares about getting you information.
Yeah.
That's it,
Lord.
right?
Okay.
I went to a seminar that he had 4 years ago, I think.
Yeah.
It's I think it was the last dog training seminar I ever went to, right? Just to see what this guy was all about. Very intelligent guy, right? Now, let's factor in a couple things here, right? So some of what he does is a little dated, just like any of these other things that we've talked about, right? Some of the things that he does, there's probably somewhat more effective types of...
I'm just making sure.
Oh.
No, I'm just making sure.
There's probably different types of punishment that would be more effective, right, in those situations. But his actual methods behind all of this are very, very spot on. So what we're going to do is we're going to get into reading some of these articles. We're going to talk about the concepts that he's discussing in them, and then we'll kind of go from there with it. So
cool.
Little bit of history on Gary. So Gary is one of the pioneers of clicker training. Right? So everybody talks about in positive only community, clicker training, click and treat, click and treat, click and treat, right? Clicker training was very revolutionized in the dog training world by Karen Pryor, right? Karen Pryor is a very, very popular positive only trainer. I don't even know if she's still alive anymore, frankly. But she, that's one of the most popular schools people go to, dog training schools, the Karen Pryor School of Dog Training, right? Karen Pryor wrote a bunch of different books and stuff on dog training, and she is very anti-aversive control, right? So she's very anti-punishment for things. Gary and Karen were both trainers at the same time, and this I think is hilarious. They both used to teach seminars together with each other. So they would do these co-seminars where they would teach clicker training, and then Gary would have segments on using aversive control, right? And this is before she became a positive-only Nazi with things. So
she died in 1997.
Did she? Okay. Yeah.
At 89 years old.
89. So Gary's, man, Gary might be almost 80. How old? I wonder if you can find that out. Gary Wilkes. What kind of age are we working with?
He looks old.
He's nowhere near as well-known of a person as she is, so.
It looks like 68.
68?
Yeah.
Really? I would have guessed older than that.
Oh. That might be a different Gary Wilkes, sorry. There's a lot of Gary Wilkes.
Regardless.
Either way.
Yeah.
Old.
So him and Karen Pryor, they both did this stuff around the same time until she obviously became very positive only and they stopped doing it. So the reason why I bring that up is because if you read his blog posts and stuff, he is just as competent of a trainer as she is from the standpoint of understanding the positive only side of things. The cool thing is he also understands the need for being able to stop unwanted behaviors, which is why he's really dedicated most of his life at this point to just that, right? So we got 2 articles here we'll get into. Let me pull them up. The first one is called Inhibitions. Right? So this is going to break down a little bit of the idea of stopping unwanted behaviors. All right. Let me do a little zoom in here. All right. Teaching inhibitions. What are you doing?
Following you.
Oh, okay.
There we go. Let me get back to it.
Teaching inhibitions. Safe, effective punishment revealed. Note. In recognition of the mainstream philosophy of modern dog training, I would like to include this preface. This article covers techniques and principles that can prevent a dog from biting your leg as you run an agility course, attacking another dog, or simply skipping out of the ring during a run. If you perceive a bias in favor of punishment over positive reinforcement, it is the result of the specific nature of the topic rather than any personal preference of mine. I use tools that are most likely to benefit the dog. I don't pre-select what I will and won't use based on my sensitivities. The dog comes first. The problem is that for more than 20 years, the growing drumbeat of all positive training has stifled discussion about teaching inhibitions. The information contained here isn't speculation. It's the result of 20 years of practical experience with literally thousands of dogs. During that time, I have never injured any dog and always left them with their tails wagging. As you will read, I have enhanced the lives of dogs by using methods that directly benefit them without possibility of harm. I like his little fuck you right at the beginning.
Yeah. How sad that he has to like put that though, you know?
But it's knowing him, like, and if you read some of his other articles, he has those kind of sassy starts to things where he's just like, note, this might be able to help your dog. Yeah. Note, I actually use my brain in how I use your dog training.
I like the beat the drum of the positive.
Yeah. All right. Okay, so here we go. About 12 years ago, I spoke at a train. Oh, also, one more little note on Gary Wilkes. So you guys have heard me talk about the use of the bonker a lot, right? Mm-hmm. It's a rolled up towel. You essentially use as a projectile to correct unwanted behaviors. It is a very, very, very controversial tool in the dog training community because you are, quote unquote, hitting a dog, right? You're using a towel, right? It's not intended to cause pain or anything. The whole idea of the use of the bonker is something moving quickly at the dog is startling, and it's using the startle effect to stop the behavior. That being said, it doesn't look nice. Like, you watch videos of bonkers, and it's not, we don't use them very often. It's more of a last resort tool only because of the perception of the tool. Mm-hmm. The reason why I say a lot of Gary's stuff is kind of dated is because he created the bonker. Right? He is the guy that literally invented the use of it and has been able to very, 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 very successfully use that tool to stop behaviors. And the reason why he uses it as opposed to e-collars, he uses e-collars, but the reason why he chooses that over it is because it's cheap, right? Everybody's got a towel in their kitchen that they could use, where not as many people want to go out and purchase a $250 e-collar, right? Yeah. So whatever. Everybody can have their opinion on it. It is a great tool. We choose not to use it that often, only because of the perception of it, though it is very effective still. Yeah. So about 12 years ago, I spoke at a training conference in Chicago. One of the people in attendance was Dee Bramble. Dee and her sister Jill own Over Rover. In my opinion, one of the best agility schools in the country. Dee's problem was simple. Her cattle dog, Boomer, routinely bit her legs during agility runs. If you've never worked with a heeler, you need to know two things to understand this problem. First, cattle dogs are bred to drive other animals by biting their heels, hence the term heeler. Boomer was a heeler in every sense of the word. Second, when cattle dogs bite, they bite, not a nip. If a 50-pound heeler nails you in the calf, you're going to be inspecting the tundra from close range. Dee's immediate problem was that unless she could stop Boomer's aggression, she would have to retire him at an early age. She had consulted a good number of trainers with no success. I fixed the immediate problem in about 20 minutes with 10 repetitions of my solution for aggression. Dee followed up the process with some touch-ups over the next few weeks. End of problem. Boomer went back to competition, but didn't bite Dee in the ring. Guys, it really is as simple as that sometimes. I mean, like, like some people come in and, like I said, like jumping, for example, right? Some people are like, Jesus Christ, like my dog's been jumping for 2 years and it's so annoying and I can't get them to stop. Yeah. And I have to like hide them when guests come over because it's so bad and stuff. And we literally stop it in, not even exaggerating, sometimes 60 seconds or less. 60 seconds or less. Jeez. Like, it really is that simple if you know how to correct for an unwanted behavior.
Yeah, that's a mind blower right there.
All right. A couple years later, I presented an agility camp at Over Rover. One of the dogs was an adolescent Malinois who had the habit of darting out of the course and attacking other dogs. After fixing him in a short 15-minute session, we sent him around the course and through a tunnel. As will ever happen when you think everything is under control, Boomer had entered the course unseen. He lives there and sometimes thinks he owns the place. Boomer entered the tunnel at exactly the same time as the Malinois, from the other end. These two male dogs had a history of aggression, had a head-on collision inside the close confines of the tunnel. No fight occurred. Both dogs turned 180 and came out the way they went in. This is the true nature of an inhibition. In the presence of all the factors that would normally trigger a behavior, it doesn't happen. In case you're wondering, I didn't use any magic formula or dominance pack animal stuff to figure out what's going on. I certainly didn't whisper at either of these dogs. In each case, I picked the moment when the unacceptable behavior started, I said the word no, and then threw a bonker, a rolled-up towel, so that it bonked them on the head from about 10 feet away, i.e., I correctly, precisely, safely, and humanely punished their aggression.
Can we just talk about that little stick on Caesar right there?
Oh,
I didn't whisper.
I didn't whisper in there.
Yeah. Oh.
Well, so here's the thing, right? Like, and this is where we, when we were reading the Caesar books, right? You take what you can get from it, but from a training standpoint, a lot of trainers don't like him because there's not a lot of precision to what he does.
Yeah.
Right? I personally really like him because I love his concepts, right? I love his ideas. I love how he talks to humans, and I like how he's able to articulate certain things.
Yeah.
But if you were to ask me, how does Caesar stop jumping? Right. And is there, how would you use Gary's methods or would you use Caesar's methods to stop jumping? I'm not going to pick Caesar's methods.
Yeah.
Right. So that's why a lot of people don't like him that much.
Yeah. I just like that. I certainly didn't whisper.
Yeah. Right. To imagine what it's like to be bonked, consider what it feels like to be in a serious pillow fight. I use a rolled up towel for 2 reasons. It poses no risk of damage to the dog, and dogs instinctively hate projectiles. More than anything, you are startling the heck out of the dog, which interrupts the behavior and causes an inhibition to form. I continued to apply this consequence each time they displayed the behavior until the behavior stopped completely. In each case, it took about 4 bonks. After the behavior was inhibited, I used lavish praise and treats to get their correct behaviors up and running again. Please read that last sentence again before you proceed. The follow-up reinforcement for correct behavior is a huge part of the long-term solution to aggression. In each case, the immediate effects of being bonked, caution, fearfulness, and confusion were transitory and short-lived. These emotional reactions are normal, acceptable, and completely harmless. More importantly, the unpleasant event of the being bonked stopped the aggression and allowed me to guide the dog to a new course of action, as I use positive reinforcement to maintain the new inhibitions. These emotional reactions are quickly forgotten and entirely inconsequential. Neither dog was done with the training until they were confidently back doing their work minus the objectionable behavior. So we talk about counter conditioning a lot, and a lot of people try to do that backwards or do that in one step. They don't stop the behavior. They just try to create a positive association with other things, and that doesn't work.
Yeah.
It doesn't. Right? You have to create an inhibition. And it's normal. We tell people this all the time. It's normal that when you correct a behavior, the dog's going to be then uncertain of what it is they should do, which could show itself in fearfulness, shyness, cautious behaviors, which is normal. It goes away very quickly because then once you've stopped the behavior, you've opened up the world to the dog to figure out a more successful way about doing whatever it is they were doing. Contrary to what you might think, this process didn't cause any of the dire predictions that are so common in modern training. The bonking didn't slow their agility runs. The dogs didn't attack me or anyone else when they got bonked. They didn't become hand shy. They didn't receive any wounds caused by their uninhibited fighting. The reality is that there were no side effects, merely beneficial, immediate, and direct effects. Boomer stopped attacking D when they ran agility, and the Malinois stopped exiting the ring to attack other dogs. The price tag for these improvements was small and nothing like the damage their aggression causes. The broad picture. Obviously, these dogs' uninhibited and unacceptable behaviors aren't unique. In fact, these behaviors are perfectly normal and all too common, even amongst serious trainers. Contrary to the popular concept that violence begates violence, in reality, it is DNA that begates violence. All dogs are born with the potential for aggression. Many people simply don't imagine their dogs will ever do anything like that. That explains the famous last words of virtually every dog bite or disobedience. Gee, he's never done that before. In most cases, this statement is entirely true, but not particularly savvy. Anyone who has been around dogs should assume that unless you specifically inhibit undesirable behavior, they may lie dormant for the dog's lifetime. Expecting a dog to magically inhibit his own natural behaviors is wishful thinking, but it has no basis in reality. Instinctive behaviors remain dormant until the correct combination of events makes the behavior functional. Then it happens. This is the same whether the behavior is aggression, scavenging, or chasing a cat. Note, by specifically inhibiting, I mean connecting an unpleasant event to a behavior that prevents it from happening in the future. That scientific term for that is positive punishment, an effect that is popularly portrayed as dangerous, traumatic, and evil, all rolled into one. The reality that most aggressive dogs will die if their behavior doesn't stop and that positive methods can't stop serious aggression seems to be lost on modern dog training philosophy.
Dang.
He's right, though.
Yeah.
You know, like, these are, like, I don't understand the idea that we would throw out one of the most effective uses of learning theory, right? Punishment for unwanted behaviors. Yeah. So that's what he's trying to get across with this, is this stuff is easier than you would think to stop.
Yeah. I think my favorite my favorite little piece there was right before the broad picture where the price tag for these improvements was small and nothing like the damage their aggression could cause.
Bingo.
You know? It's like you're doing this small little things. Boop.
Yeah.
And that's stopping someone getting seriously injured or another dog, and then the dog has to be put down because it's got a bite record or something.
Yep.
I bonked its head with a towel.
And again, I'll caveat this with, if you want to go buy an e-collar, you can do the same thing with an e-collar.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So if you don't want to use a bonker, go use an e-collar.
Yeah.
Use a pet corrector. Use a squirt bottle. Use whatever you want to do, right? He just uses a bonker because it's widely accessible. It's pretty easy to use, and it's very, very cheap.
Also, just a quick caveat on the pet corrector. I swear we've got more negative comments on when you used a pet corrector than an e-collar ever.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it's literally just compressed
air.
Yeah, it's compressed air. But people are like losing their minds.
People freak out.
Yeah.
All right. Competitors, beware. A common occurrence at dog events and dog parks is an unexpected fight between seemingly obedient dogs. In some cases, one of the dogs has a history of aggression, and the other is a sweet, innocent, completely passive creature who is suddenly forced to fight for his life. As a result of the incident, the recently never aggressive dog often becomes wary of other dogs and starts to attack before he could be attacked. His primary motivation for future violence is fearful self-defense. This creates an odd irony. His owner is unlikely to use any form of correction to stop this newfound aggression because it might scare the dog. A dog who is already terrified, far worse than any punishment protocol can evoke. In essence, the dog's emotions have suddenly been elevated to a status that ruins any chance of fixing the problem. This would be like refusing necessary medical treatment because it might scare your dog. Logically, if pain and fear were always traumatic, all dogs would be terrified of the vet. Equally logical is the notion that no one assumes that withholding the necessary discomfort at a vet clinic is a justification for withholding treatment. I would suggest that since most canine aggression is fatal, it deserves the same logic applied to its solution. Fear and pain is not automatically an ethical reason to withhold treatment for either medical or behavioral problems. If I were to limit my methods to positive reinforcement, I would run into a very big snag. The now aggressive dog's fearfulness makes the use of positive reinforcement impractical to pointless. A scared dog won't take treats and, at best, is annoyed by your attempts to pet and stroke him. Some dogs will snap reflexively at any attempt to physically restrain them when they are near the threshold that triggers their attack. A logical analysis would yield this result. You have a dog who is scared silly, won't take treats, and is focusing on killing any dog who steps over his particular boundaries. In most cases, people do nothing and hope for the best, or stop taking the dog to dog events. If you read dog books, magazines, and internet sites, you will probably assume that I've forgotten the two most common ways to solve behavioral problems: gradual desensitization, getting a dog used to being attacked by giving him treats, or counter-conditioning, teaching the dog an incompatible behavior that somehow prevents the dog from defending himself. That's funny. Gradual desensitization, getting a dog used to being attacked by giving him treats.
I know.
It does. It's funny, though, the way it's worded.
Yeah.
It makes it so ridiculous.
Yeah, it's so snarky.
Yeah.
I like it.
These two methods are rarely adequate to stop the behavior. As I said, aggression, along with foraging, eating inedible objects, and a host of other unacceptable behaviors are the result of DNA, not learning. These are normally occurring behaviors. The reality is that positive reinforcement cannot inhibit normally occurring behaviors. To make this point clear, here's a logical parallel to the treats to prevent aggression perspective. Example, just as with aggression, leg lifting to urinate is a genetic behavior triggered by age and environmental cues, such as the smell of another dog's urine. To use gradual desensitization, one would use dilutions of male dog urine to offer a level of smell that doesn't trigger leg lifting. If the dog doesn't lift his leg in the presence of the weaker smell, you give treats and affection. Gradually, you increase the potency of the urine until you're at 100% urine with no leg lifting. Voila, instinctive leg lifting vanishes. Not. If you select counter-conditioning to stop normally occurring leg lifting, it rapidly becomes laughable. Does anyone imagine you could stop a mature dog from lifting his leg by giving him treats for an incompatible behavior like roll over? Even if you could possibly slow down the leg lifting this way, counter-conditioning doesn't remove the dog's ability to instantly regenerate the behavior at a later date. At best, this solution requires perpetual vigilance, a constantly hungry dog, and a tolerance for periodic reoccurrences of the behavior. This is an annoyance of the behavior is leg lifting, and disastrous if the behavior is aggression. Another great point.
Yeah, that was a great way to look at it.
The positive reinforcement, right? The rewarding, the counter-conditioning, the desensitization does nothing to actually stop the behavior, which is why it has to be used after you've stopped the behavior, not before.
Yeah. Voila, instinctive leg lifting vanishes. Not.
That part's got to be a clip. That example part.
Yeah, definitely.
Needless embarrassment versus artful pride. Aggression in the ring, like boomers, is only one of several embarrassing problems you'll see in the modern training world. A few years ago, a top agility competitor left the ring dripping blood from her arm. Her border collie was so jacked up at the end of the run that he leapt up and bit her forearm. Her solution was to wear long sleeves for the summer. Don't think this is limited to the sport of agility. Last year at a major competition of police dog handlers, the same thing happened. A very jacked up Malinois, who was frustrated at being told not to bite a bite-suited cop, that he leaped in the air and attached himself to his handler. On a lesser scale of importance, but equally common, you will also see dogs exit the ring in the middle of a run to go sniff a treat that was dropped on the ground while their handler screams commands that aren't likely to be obeyed. Sometimes it's to make a beeline for another dog. Other times it's merely to frolic and do whatever it is in the dog's mind. In an all-positive world, these time-wasting and frustrating behaviors are a fact of life for a significant number of people. That's because positive reinforcement cannot inhibit normally occurring behavior. The only behavioral effect that can stop an existing, normally occurring behavior is positive punishment. Realistically, you can learn to use this tool to safely teach your dog to work to its full potential or not. Catch 22. You may train with people who believe that any use of punishment will ruin a dog. I would suggest that most of these people are basing their philosophy on good intentions and a hearsay. I would also suggest that you likely have no actual experience at using punishment correctly, safely, and effectively. The use of punishment is almost universally assaulted and equally unknown. To my knowledge, there is only one college-level course that includes a discussion of why, when, and how to use punishment, and I teach it. At a major, the rules that I will outline here cover how to stop behaviors without any risk to the animal, meaning how to punish correctly. I will assert that attempting to punish by throwing all manner of nastiness at a dog is merely abuse and has nothing to do with this topic. The ancient Romans recognized the illogical, I can't talk today, man. The illogic of the current rhetoric opposing all forms of punishment. The abuse of a tool is not an argument against its proper use. If you're interested in understanding this issue fully, read on.
You didn't even want to try that Roman little thing, huh?
Abusum non tulit usas.
There you go.
Is that it?
Sounds close enough.
All right. The proper usage. The first thing to understand about inhibiting behaviors is this. Positive reinforcement or withholding positive reinforcement cannot create inhibitions. To show you how important I think this is, I'm going to repeat myself so you could possibly miss the point. Ready? Okay. Again. Positive reinforcement or withholding positive reinforcement cannot create inhibitions. Just in case you didn't hear. It doesn't matter how many letters you put after your name, where you were trained, or what species you work with. This is a biological fact and inescapable. If it seems that I've been a bit forceful in making this point, I assure you it's a critical link to solving the overall puzzle of behavioral control, and it is rarely given the emphasis it deserves. To put it further in context, let's take a step back and look more closely at the underlying principle, inhibition. Okay, what exactly is an inhibition? Behavior analysts and dog behavior experts rarely use the word, but it's a pretty apt term for our purposes and one that virtually everyone understands. Here's Webster's take on it. Inhibition, an inner impediment to free activity, expression, or functioning, as a mental process imposing restraint upon behavior or another mental process as a desire. To paraphrase Webster, an inhibition is a roadblock that stops a behavior from happening. I would add that to be at all useful, an inhibition must include this criteria. Even in the presence of all things that would normally trigger the behavior doesn't happen. If you listen to most dog trainers and the majority of dog owners, they invariably make excuses about their dog's behavior. He does a great stay unless he hears the doorbell, or she was attacked by a bearded collie once. Ever since then, she's had really bad around shaggy dogs. If you wish to stop making excuses for your dog's bad behavior, you must learn how to stop it in the real world, not a world devoid of shaggy dogs and starting lines. The most important thing to remember is this. Positive reinforcement strengthens behavior through pleasant means. It doesn't stop them. In most cases, it is impractical, if not impossible, to remove all of the positively reinforces influences that perpetuate a behavior. Even if you succeed temporarily, there's no inhibition that prevents the behavior from instantly regenerating when reinforcement again becomes available. That's why a single guest in your house who boogie-woogie kissy kisses your dog will destroy your attempts to withhold reinforcement for jumping on guests. In the broader world, consider how easy it is for one puff of tobacco smoke to ruin someone's attempt to quit smoking. True story. Ask me how. If you doubt that behavior don't go away merely as a result of not reinforcing them. Try to remember any of your elementary school teachers or your house when you were a child. I doubt that anyone has rewarded you for coming up with that information in a long, long time. Did you forget it after all those years? Nope. Hey, I thought if you stop reinforcing a behavior, it will go away. See how silly that sounds when you plug it into the real world? Okay. This brings us to the crew of the issue. Understanding how to inhibit behavior spans everything from allowing a dog to realize its potential in the agility ring to potentially saving its life. I'm not exaggerating about the last part. I spent 8 years euthanizing dogs who exhibited no worse problem than heeling the children around the swimming pool or jumping up when greeting guests. Dogs who can't adapt to humans die at a rate of 9-to-1 to the tune of tens of millions annually. You may decry the triviality of why people get rid of dogs, but you can't beat the horrific odds by laminating a tragedy. The only way to solve these problems is to stop to learn the behaviors that make the dogs unwanted and impossible for normal people to live with. If you think that people who participate in dog sports aren't involved in this process, think again. When a newbie at your agility club ends up like a dog like Boomer, what are you going to do about it? Are you going to suggest the dog be put in a timeout every time the behavior occurs? Remember, the behavior isn't being driven by reinforcement and won't stop if you somehow remove reinforcement. You can't make a heeler stop by putting him in a crate for 5 minutes. Even if you could, you'd be wasting a better part of your time with your dog in a crate rather than shooting for a clean run. Don't assume that the only one talking about in-ring aggression. A newbie whose dog exits the ring constantly or stands around sniffing discarded treats is likely to get a different dog or simply stop doing agility out of frustration or embarrassment. When the club's never say no policy fails to stop the behavior, what happens to the dog? Assuming that they are going to keep the dog that can't participate in their new hobby may be wishful thinking. If you can't stop the unwanted behavior, you have a win-win situation. If you can't, the newbie is on her own and may decide to take up quilting. It takes moral courage to apply an unpleasant consequence to a dog's behavior. It's easy to be a coward, ignore the behavior, and learn to live with botched runs, bitten children, and dog-at-large citations. The choice is yours. The logical result of programs that use nothing but pleasant consequences is simple. To express it best, I must use a hackneyed cliche that is perfectly appropriate for the discussion. Failing to use unpleasant consequences to stop behaviors such as jumping and biting leads to a consistent result. You literally kill the dog with kindness. This article is not meant to use as an outline to effectively inhibit behavior. It is meant as a reminder for you that the process requires learned skills and the practice time to some proficient at those skills. It is also not meant for someone to skim the information and then run around bonking dogs, and that's why it ends here. For more information regarding inhibitions, you can go to my website, clickandtreat.com.
That was good. That was real good.
So we start with that one, obviously, because we want to make sure everybody understands the importance of punishment. We want everybody to understand why this stuff is so important, and it's presented, obviously, in a very blunt way, right? These are the reasons why punishment is necessary, and these are the reasons why dogs are getting returned so much. Every question I get asked pertains to this to some extent, right? If people understand this, and if people start to learn how to effectively do this, we will have less issues with it. People will have to spend less money on trainers, less money on vet bills, less money on getting new dogs and trying to find all these different solutions for it, and people will be able to enjoy their dogs more. And that is the key to a lot of this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
All right. Last part here, we're going to skim through this. I'm not going to read this entire article, but this is another article off his website called Aversive Control, a Biological and Evolutionary Perspective, Part 3. This is a really, really interesting 3 articles that he wrote. They're all fairly long, and they get into the idea of actually stopping unwanted behaviors, right? And some of the science behind it. We get a lot of people that talk about, where's the science? We only use science-based dog training.
Yeah.
There's a lot of science in this kind of stuff. There's more to, and this even pisses me off when I have clients that come in, and I'll ask them, I was like, okay, cool, dog made a mistake here. What are you going to do? And their response, shock the dog, right? No, you're wrong, right? Yeah. That is not the solution to it, because there's a lot more to it than just pushing your button. And if you understand the nuances behind it, that's why I said, don't run around just bonking dogs. You have to understand you have to understand how to do some of this stuff in order to be effective with it. Yeah. Because if you just go around pressing a button, or if you just go around throwing a tool, dog is never going to figure it out. No. So we're going to skip all of this article except the end. The end is criteria for creating a punishment contingency. 4 simple rules that it must follow. Okay? Number 1, intolerable. The stimulus event that inhibits the behavior must be considered intolerable by the organism. While mainstream behaviorists assume the worst, they rarely use their imagination to discover things that can inhibit behavior but cannot do damage, even if they did it wrong. Almost all mammals hate projectiles flying at them. If you fold an average-sized towel in half and roll it into a tight tube, bind it with heavy rubber bands on both ends, you have a professional-quality bonker. If you launch this at a dog, he will invariably consider it intolerable. This tool takes a small amount of rational thought to use. Do not bonk a Shih Tzu in the eyes. Here's an example of the horrible, nasty, risky, traumatic use of punishment to stop a dog from jumping on guests. If you think there's something wrong with this, there's something wrong with you. Note the dog is wagging its tail throughout the procedure. This is a good test of how much anti-punishment Kool-Aid you've consumed in your life. If you can oppose a procedure that stops a behavior but doesn't even make the dog stop wagging its tail, you are officially a blind ideologue. And then there's a video attached to it of him stopping jumping with a bonker.
Yeah.
So thing number 1 here, you need a battery there?
Yeah, but you can get through this and then before we go to number 2.
All right. So the idea here is that the dog has to not like the consequence, right? Yeah. This is something that, forget the bonker for a minute. Whatever you're using, the dog has to really not like it. That is the only thing that will make it so that the dog remembers the consequence next time and wants to avoid that consequence. Yeah. If you're using a bonker, you got to make sure the dog cares enough about it, because there's some dogs that don't care that much about it. If you're using an e-collar, your level has to be motivating enough for the given distraction, right? Just tapping the button isn't enough. You have to be able to really look at that situation and be like, did my dog care about this? If you're using a pet corrector, the dog has to be spooked enough by it in order to care enough about it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that is thing number 1.
Perfect.
Good. I'm not even pausing this, so you better
not even
get to quick. We ain't pausing. We're rolling. This is funny. I can't believe we haven't really read any of these Gary Wilkes articles before.
I don't know why.
It's good stuff.
It's good stuff.
He's very sassy, right? You know.
Love it.
So what happens when you give an old guy the ability to write blogs? You know.
Also, he shows his age because his email address is an AOL address. I was like, dang. What was the other one back in the day? MSN?
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, MSN was one. SBC Global. That was our OG one. Then Gmail came around, just took over the world. Remember when Gmail came out? And it was like, now literally everybody and their mother has Gmail.
Yep.
Everybody got the Gmail.
I think it was because Google was like the first one that was like really free. I think maybe Yahoo was.
I'm not sure because my first one was the Yahoo one. Yeah. That's why I got the old Y mail.
Yeah. Well, because AOL you had to pay for it.
Yeah.
I think.
Are we good?
Yes.
All right. Thing number 2. Immediately identified. The American Veterinarian Society of Animal Behavior has a public position statement on punishment. You can find it online. In essence, their position is that you shouldn't use it because they don't use it. They list a bunch of reasons why it's terrible, dangerous process. One of the most critical is this guideline. Apparently, punishment must be applied as the animal is performing the target behavior or within 1 second of the behavior to be most effective. This is completely mistaken. Now, this one here, most common misconception about punishment. And this is, I remember when I went to this seminar, this was my biggest takeaway from it. And I will tell you, when I started implementing this into things, I got so much backlash from other trainers. People were like, you're so wrong. You're wrong. This is not correct. Blah, 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 blah.
Oh, boy. Okay.
Guess what? It works.
Yeah.
Pavlov demonstrated repeatedly that a conditioned association to a previously neutral stimulus could include a long-term latency. In the specific experiment, a bell was associated with electric shock. The latency between bell and shock was gradually extended. A dog so conditioned would give a perfect galvanic response 30 minutes after hearing the bell, meaning muscular flinch. The point is that if you say the word no or its equivalent at the instant the behavior starts, the tangible punishment can be applied almost leisurely and the dog will still make the connection. For practical purposes, 10 or 15 seconds delays are not a problem. If you say the word no first and you make sure you bonk the dog, see criteria number 4, the issue is that contiguity? I don't know. Is in the physiology of the dog, not the mind of the behaviorist. The practical meaning of this information is that you do not have to apply the punishment immediately. You must have a signal that identifies the behavior immediately. Consider the phrase, wait till your father gets home and see what you've done. If you think of the timing of pushing the shutter button on a camera, you will understand the timing perfectly. Imagine you are taking a picture of the instant before the behavior starts, and you will be able to do this procedure correctly with good timing. So again, we have to identify the behavior right away. The punishment could then come at any point after, right? So as long as the dog understands that thing you're doing wrong, from there, if you deliver your correction, even if the dog is no longer rehearsing the behavior, you can still punish it and they will still know what that correction is for. Here's the importance of this, especially in our type of training with e-collars. Say my e-collar remote is all the way on the other side of the room down there, right? My dog's over there and jumps on my counter and goes to steal a cookie, right?
Yeah.
Right away, if I say no and mark that behavior, I identify that behavior. I've taken my picture of the dog on the counter taking the cookie. And then I get up and casually walk all the way over there, grab my remote, and my dog's no longer even near the counter, and I give my correction. My dog will still make the association that that correction was for whatever they were doing when they heard no, and the behavior will stop. How do I know this? Because I've done it numerous times, and you can see that it clearly works.
Yeah.
Nobody questions classical conditioning when it comes to positive associations. Pavlov's bell. Click. As long as you click when the dog does the thing and give them a treat, they know it's for what they were doing when they heard the click. That's why we have a freaking click. But nobody understands that it can be done with punishment as well.
Yeah.
And I think it's because, like he's saying, people are just so against it that they don't want to say it works and it's easier than they think it is.
Yeah. So do people who are giving you backlash because they think
they're saying it's wrong?
Yeah, they're not making the association.
Yeah. So I remember the biggest one was people would say, you're punishing the dog when the dog's not even doing the thing and they don't know what that correction is for. So you're abusing the dog is the idea. I was like, no. They made the connection. They know what it's for because they stopped the behavior and now they don't do it anymore.
Yeah.
So whatever. Thing number 3, inescapable. If you say no and then squirt a dog in the face, there is a high probability that a mild inhibition will be created. If you say the word no and the dog turns his head so that the water hits him on the shoulder, he has escaped the aversive nature of the squirt, and it is no longer intolerable. Likewise, if you say no and throw a bonker at a dog who is suddenly running away from you, and the bonk on the butt is unlikely to create an inhibition. This is easily fixed. Position the person with the bonker in the direction the dog is likely to escape or hunt the dog down, and make sure you bonk him on the head. Likewise, if the dog tries to hide under the bed, block the gap from the floor to the frame, or just shut the door, thereby preventing escape. If you use your problem-solving abilities, this is an easy, established criterion. So the idea here is the correction has to come every time you say no. Now, again, the reason why I use an e-collar for this kind of stuff is it avoids that problem, right?
They can't get away from it.
They can't escape an e-collar correction, right? The benefit to the bonker, and this is what Gary says all the time, is just the fact that you don't have to have a collar on your dog all the time. Mm-hmm. That's it. You're not contingent on it being charged or not charged. You know, it will always be there, and you will always have the ability to use it at any hour throughout the day.
Yeah.
Right? But it has to come every time. That means if you say no, you have to deliver a consequence, because when it starts becoming escapable and the dog only gets it sometimes, dogs are opportunists. They will not get the point, and they will continue trying the behavior, especially with things that are extremely self-reinforcing. So say jumping on the counter and stealing a cookie. If they get away with it 50% of the time, that reinforcement for doing that behavior is better than that possibility that they might get a correction. But if they know every time they do it, there will be an intolerable correction that's inescapable, that is identified immediately when the dog does the thing, it will happen.
Yep.
Number 4, inevitable. The point of Pavlov's research has largely been mistaken by behaviorists. The fact that he can create a 100% reflexive response to a conditioned stimulus was perceived as a surrogate for tangible reinforcement or punishment. The actual function of the conditional stimulus is to limit the amount of information the animal must process to discover the connection between a behavior and a consequence. In essence, it is a hitch that links a specific behavior to a specific result. This has led to the assumption that one has achieved success if by saying no, the animal stops the unacceptable behavior. That is a grand mistake. Learning and inhibition is a two-part process. It requires a signal that identifies the specific behavior, followed by a tangible, intolerable consequence. If you say no, you're obligated to apply the punishment if your goal is to inhibit the behavior. So, what he's saying here is the goal is not that we say no and the dog stops the behavior. The goal is that the behavior goes away altogether so that we don't have to say no in the first place. Yeah. Which is a inhibition. So, whole talks on punishment. A little bit of good information there for you guys. And I want people to reference this as a further reinforcement that these problems they're having are typically more simple to stop than they think. And if you apply those concepts there and you make sure you're motivating enough, you make sure you're consistently delivering corrections, you make sure those corrections are clearly timed, you make sure the dog can't get away from those corrections, these behaviors will stop no matter what it is. Yeah. So don't worry so much about the specific issue you're having, right? Because it's not going to change the process for any of this kind of stuff. Just look at how do I apply those criteria to these specific problems we're having, and voila. Voila. You've been able to train your dog without spending a bunch of money.
Boom.
What do you think?
I think it was great. I think we need to read more Gary Wilkes stuff.
Gary Wilkes.
I do. He's a sassy old man. That you are not kidding.
No, you don't play games.
No.
At a seminar. This is actually really funny. Him and I got in a couple really, really like heated discussions with each other.
Really?
Well, because here's the thing, right? Like I love to argue logic, right? Like I don't want to argue like you know, like things that like are potentials or ideas or this or that. Yeah. But like when there are like specific logical things or reasons for things, I love to debate them, right?
Okay.
And Gary is very much a this is my way or the highway kind of guy. So when I went to his seminar, he was there to educate. He was not there to discuss. You know?
Gotcha.
So there were certain points throughout the seminar where I would ask a question and his response would basically just be like, because I said so, you know, and then he would try to move past it as quickly as possible. And then I would kind of like go at it.
Yeah.
I remember there's one time, it was like a 3-day seminar. We were like in day 2 or something like that. And I was like in this discussion with him. And the seminar was hosted by actually Jeff Gelman of Solid Canine Training, long-haired guy on YouTube. Everybody knows who he is, does his own podcast show and everything like that. Same deal, been training dogs forever. And, you know, he was hosting it. So Jeff is just sitting in the back. He's known Gary for a long time and stuff. And I'm getting into it with him. And Gary basically said, like, you're either going to sit here and listen to me or you're going to leave to me. And I was like, God damn it. Right. So whatever. I shut up, you know, at the end, Jeff just came up to me after and he's like, you should know this by now. He's like, this is not the guy that you're trying to do this with. He's like laughing about it. He's like, this is just who he is. He's like, you're not going to win.
Yeah. Oh man!
So very smart guy, right? Yeah. And like I learned a ton from that seminar. It was a really great seminar. Yeah. But man, yeah, he is sassy. All right, Doobie. Anything else to throw in here?
No, that was great.
It was good.
I say that all the time, but I think we've like upped every time. You know, we started first talking about Caesar or with Caesar. Then we went to Sean O'Shea, and then we went to the Monks and Newski, and now Gary Wilkes. And I feel like we're getting so much different information. You know, they all look at things differently, and I think he's my favorite though, because he's just sassy.
Yeah,
but that's what I liked about the Monks and Newski too. They were
had a little bit of tude to it.
Yeah, they were like nice sassy, and then this guy's just like
you don't give a fuck.
No,
not a single fuck.
Oh man.
All right, we're going to wrap that up. We're doing another one tomorrow, so we'll have plenty of more information to discuss with all you guys. In the meantime, enjoy podcast 35. Find him at Josh Dove Productions. Find me at Miracle Canine Trainer, David the Dog Trainer. See you tomorrow.